Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Conversations with the Planets. And today we have a really exciting episode that is a recording of an NCGR asteroid surge meeting that we host every Tuesday, every second Tuesday of every month at 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern time. We meet to discuss asteroids and asteroid research and the mythology and stories associated with different asteroids. And so this is just to kind of share a little bit about how this group meets and what it's like to join us for meetings. There's more information down below if you're interested in joining us for any future meetings. And today we'll be talking about a recently named celestial body, Uni. And so I will pass it off to Lori to share the research she's been doing about this.
Yeah, awesome. So Uni, she was an ancient Etruscan goddess, and she actually is a TNO, so technically not an asteroid, but a dwarf planet. And we'll talk a little bit more later about what exactly that means. And she was actually discovered back in, I believe, 2002, but then wasn't named until last September. And with the TNOs, I've noticed that they often get named way later than they are discovered. And a big reason for that is because TNOs move very slowly. They're like Pluto. So when you think about the movement of taking between 15 to sometimes 50 years in each sign. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer to get to know the planetary body and see how it shows up before naming it. And so Uni was recently named, and it was a really funny synchronicity because I finished the book, but then I was just kind of in this liminal waiting period. And I ended up discovering, I started going through, which I shouldn't have done. I should have left it alone. But I ended up going through this whole list of recently named asteroids and TNOs and other planetary bodies. And I put together a whole list of all of these deities who were named in the past year. And I basically, whenever I have some free time, I've just been choosing a name off the list and searching where it is, searching what it's doing, and going into a little bit of research. And if I find it really interesting, I've been adding them into the book. And if I don't have time, I've just been keeping a list collected that I will add into a volume two later in the future. But uni was one that really, really spoke to me. And the biggest reason for that is because she was the archetype that eventually became Juno or Hera. And since we had just done a podcast episode about Juno and Hera, with Diana Rose Harper, the timing of finding Uni felt really incredible. And so I started really diving into her myth and her story a little bit more. And so I want to share a little bit of her story. So she was one of the supreme goddesses of the Etruscan pantheon. There were three. They were a trio. And so she formed the sacred triad with her husband, um, Tian Tinia. I'm really bad at pronunciations, but yeah. Um, so this was basically Jupiter or Zeus in archetype. And then they had a daughter named Minerva, who was the goddess of wisdom. And I have so much to say about their daughter. I think that's one of the most interesting and maybe important conversations that we can have. Um, but she was basically seen as a protector of women, and she embodied this divine dignity of motherhood and sovereignty. And later, when she was identified with Juno by the Romans and then Hera by the Greeks, um, that was when her story seems to have gotten conflated into that jealous wife archetype. Because when I started reading through a lot of the Etruscan stories, that was not a thing. And so it's really interesting how that got added through the patriarchal lens, basically. And especially when we look at this Etruscan story, it was so ancient that it predated a lot of that. And she has this one specific story with this hero named Hercule, who was basically Heracles or Hercules. And he reconciled with Uni after he performed his labors, and the labors in this pantheon seems to be about the same as Hercules or Heracles's labors. And in this act of divine adoption, one of the peaks of her stories was that she offered her breasts to the fully grown hero and nursed him and basically took him in as her own son and granted him immortality among the gods. Rather than a lot of the conflict that I feel like you see with the Greek and Roman versions of these stories, this version really focused on her ability to take him as her own son and showing that with the breast milk, which we talk a lot about in the previous episode that we did with Diana. Um, and when I looked through a lot of the Etruscan art and like depictions of her, they're so majestic and nurturing and it was just so interesting to me how none of it had anything to do with jealousy or rivalry or like any of the roles that you see her play in a lot of the Greek and Roman pantheons. She just had so much to do with this like divine feminine. She also was equated with Astarte, who also has an asteroid, number 672, um, who was also a really prominent goddess of the time. And yeah, she really represented this idea of like the family unit being so loving, caring, and nurturing. And so it's interesting to me because she is basically all of the things that we see in Juno and Hera, but it leaves out this anger, this jealousy, this like feminine rage that you see show up so much. And going back to Minerva, it's fascinating. The more I looked into their daughter, Minerva in this pantheon was not born from Zeus's head alone. She emerged from both of them. Like she was both of their daughters. And so she actually represented this idea of wisdom belonging to the family unit rather than solely to the father or the masculine that kind of got conflated within the Greek pantheon. And yeah, so she just has this much softer, much more feminine tone. And I feel like that was something we talked about a lot in the past episode when we talked about Juno and Hera and how she manifests, because she's often seen as just the jealous wife or just anger or rage or like almost like a cautionary tale. This is what happens when somebody pushes you to your limit and you get angry. But I've always kind of wondered who would Juno have been if she wasn't pushed to this limit. And now we actually have a version of her that wasn't. We have Uni to look at for this.
That's great. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, and I think that's so interesting, the hero that she ends up nursing and that being so different than, the Greek myth where Heracles' name literally means the honor of Hera, as like because she was so jealous and angry that Zeus had Hercules or Heracles with another woman, that like this whole naming comes in as like baked into the jealousy that's associated with the goddess Hera. And then you have this other myth where it's like, you know, this like ultimate like giving of herself that is what breastfeeding is. And because I am currently a breastfeeding mother. We talk about that in the Hera and Juno episode, but there's a lot of like tenderness and selflessness that comes from, giving your milk to someone else. And so that's just such an interesting, like evocative image to me, as opposed to, how we get Heracles from the Greek pantheon.
Yeah, that was definitely the thing that really stood out to me is just how different the myths are. They're so intertwined, but you can see all of the different ways that the Greeks took it and changed it. And even
Hmm.
just like the brief little changes that made so much of an impact.
Hmm. Does anyone have any other reflections or anything that stuck out to them with Lori sharing about uni? No pressure, but we want to open up this space to be very conversational like it normally is. Because, of course, this meeting's a little different since we are recording it for a podcast, but normally these meetings are just a really great opportunity for folks to converse and share their own personal stories and perspectives and experiences. So I want to open that up for anyone who has anything to share right now.
Well, I just love that what you shared is she's not the angry, jealous, raging
Yeah.
Yeah.
goddess, because I feel like that's been so much put on the feminine, in
hmm
the last centuries.
Completely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it felt like such a different image of the same archetype, um, but at the same time so different. And Uni's actually conjunct my moon. Not super close. I think it was 4.5 degrees, but still there. She was in Aries for a very, very long time, probably still is. Um, and yeah, it was definitely this moment. It was like a light bulb moment when I found her because I had felt like this had to have existed, and it felt so good to find it.
Mm.
and how do you find her, or where she is in the horoscope?
Yeah, so she is asteroid number 55637, if you guys want to go look her up right now.
Okay.
She's probably an Aries.
And
Well,
Like I
and while
said,
we're,
oh, go
oh,
ahead.
sorry, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like I said, she's a TNO, so she's very slow moving. So she was in Aries for a very long time.
Well, that's what I was about to say is while we're looking that up, do you want to share a little bit more about like TNOs
Yeah,
versus asteroids and
yeah. Um, well, let's talk about the interpretation of
okay.
uni a little bit first, I think, and then we can get into TNOs. Um, because yeah, if we're looking her up, we might as well talk about how she can show up. That might be
Hmm.
a little bit different than Juno. Um, but yeah, I feel like she can show up as like obviously the sacred oaths and the same idea of commitment that Juno has and honoring your commitments, but there feels like there's more of a um reciprocal energy to it. It's
It's more
like,
like community, like the unit
yeah.
of like when we, Lori and I went to Argos and visited the land of Hera, and it was when I was starting to get very, very close with the man who's now like the father of my child
Mhm.
and my partner. And I experienced so much rage when we were in Argos, and that was just Hera showing up. And that we talk about that in the Hera episode. But um finally, like when I kind of started to integrate that, I was talking to my partner and I was like, what I'm learning here is 1 + 1 = 3. And then he had just bought this painting that is like these two, like it's a couple embracing each other in the water, and the name of the painting is 1 + 1 = 3. And now we have a child, so literally 1 + 1 = 3. But like that feels more like that uni energy, especially like that whole, like the
Yeah.
integral, like unit that is what your family, which could be, like I'm in a heterosexual relationship with a biological child, but like there's so many ways that could show up as well that, aren't just like the stereotypical types of family units, but like Uni just sounds a lot more like there's a lot more cohesion there than you might see with like Juno and Hera can have that too, but Uni just sounds
Mhm.
like the cohesion's very strong in her mythology.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And like community showed up a lot in her mythology. I mean, she was the queen of the gods as well, like just like Hera and Juno was. Um, but there was a really deep line around like protection that shows up a lot in her
Mm,
myth, like how communities can thrive most when they stand up and protect each other, and like guardianship and protection showing up as like not just protecting each other, but protecting the unit, protecting the family,
mhm,
protecting the community as a whole at large, rather than just like a one-sided protecting of yourself almost, which I
mm,
feel like you see a lot with Hera, especially. Um, and like she had this almost like equal power and nurturing as kind of like a that made her well-rounded and she was loved for it. And it wasn't really seen as like a negative, which I feel like sometimes shows up in a lot of other myths, especially all the Greek myths, right? Like being feminine was seen as like a weakness, not a power. But she really like that nurturing side of her was really seen as a power and not having to overextend yourself to lose your authority, basically. It was like a big way I saw her showing up. Um, and then yeah, I also think she can highlight themes of like motherhood, fertility, creative abundance, and then obviously the strong devotion to family, partner, community, all the things that we just talked about, um, and like commitments and loyalty and all of that. But yeah, once again, it's just that theme of protection that shows up so much with her. It's like, what do you protect and what do you feel protective of?
mhm,
And I feel like her placement in your chart or the planet she's conjunct or the house she's in could maybe give you a little bit more about what you might feel very like protective of.
mhm. Yeah, like if your uni is in the fifth house and maybe you are literally protective of your
Hmm.
children or your artistic endeavors, or if it's in the 11th, maybe you're more protective of your friends.
Yeah. Yeah. She's in my 10th with my moon, and I'm definitely protective of my career. So, yeah, I feel like she shows up real strong with that. And then yeah, some of the negatives or difficulties could definitely be like possessiveness, overprotectiveness, pride, being overly concerned, maybe with status or having a difficulty releasing control over things, struggling with codependency, or of course over-identifying with like caregiver roles and stuff like that shows up with most of these, a lot of these.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, but like I feel like the biggest thing is just finding the balance between keeping your power, but also being motherly and nurturing towards something. It's like you can be powerful and still be feminine.
Mhm. And like that is its own incredible power to be able to nurture life
Exactly.
and help life grow. And
Yeah.
like the tenderness and gentleness that need to come from that. And you know, it's like what would the world look like if we made our decisions considering the most vulnerable among us, right? And like as a mother of an 8-month-old child, like that is always what I'm thinking is like, what does this incredibly vulnerable person need? But I feel like that's a lot of the wisdom that Uni and Hera and Juno and you know other goddesses I'm sure from many other pantheons that represent these like motherly like breastfeeding queen of the god type energies is like how do we move in ways that protect the most vulnerable in our communities.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like working as a unit and yeah, and their daughter representing wisdom from the family rather than just wisdom being a masculine trait. Um,
Mm-hmm.
just like as a person who has Palace so prominent in my chart, like it just really made me happy to see that written.
Mm-hmm. And then,
Um,
like when we were learning about how to work with asteroids with Demetra George, one of the things she kept repeating was how if you have multiple asteroids or deities, or, you can get into planets or fixed stars, or there's different energies. But if you have multiple ones that have overlapping themes or are from the same pantheon or have things in common, that can like really emphasize that is a significant storyline in your life or in the life of a client or someone's chart you're reading, right? So it's like if you have Juno
for
and
sure.
Hera and Uni prominent, then that's like screaming out that mythology. So this also just gives
Yeah.
us another body for people who do resonate with like the mythology of Juno to look, well, like, okay, well,
Yeah.
where's Uni? Is that also prominent?
Yeah, exactly. And like I like kind of separately, I've been thinking a lot about Metis recently too, because Metis is also conjunct my sun with my palace. And Metis, we won't get too deep into it because I have so much to say about her, but she was swallowed by Zeus, and because of the prophecy that she would have a daughter that would be more wise than her and a son that would overtake Zeus. And so, just like that family pattern went, he swallows her, and that was the reason why Athena was born from his head.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually, my favorite poem from the poetry book I just released is about Metis. And it's about that feeling of like the father getting all of the credit for everything, but like you're trapped inside the walls and like stuck being the inner conscious of this man who has like trapped you and swallowed you whole, right? And so I've just spent so much time thinking about her archetype and like this idea of that entrapment, and then finding Uni, and then finding a version of Athena that was born from mother and father in a version where Metis never existed. It was just so interesting to kind of see this like crossing of the myths being just so wildly different.
Mm-hmm.
And
Totally.
yeah.
What degree
Totally.
and sign is she now? Is she in
Oh,
Is
right
Uni?
now.
yes.
Um,
I think I can look that up pretty quickly.
yeah, I was gonna say I probably could too. I don't
Okay.
have it pulled up, but
I Now I can't pull it. Mercury's currently retrograding for folks listening to this
Yep.
I
recording. So I'm like,
know.
okay, we can pull it up quick, and then here we are. Um,
I know. I'm like, I feel like I have an open
oh,
tab.
she's in Taurus. She's
Oh,
at 26 Taurus.
20. Oh, right.
And yeah.
So near that all goal, right?
Yeah, that is true.
Interesting.
Um, well, before we kind of talk about TNOs and then kind of wrap up the recording, does anyone have any other like reflections or thoughts or questions about what we've talked about? Or I like if you looked her up in your chart.
Yeah, did anyone else have her?
I don't know where she is. I mean, in my horoscope, I have Juno very prominent on my ascendant.
Hmm.
Very cool.
So I'm curious where she is, but I don't know where.
Mm.
Where do
Well,
you go? Astro dash seek or something? Astro
I
seek?
Oh,
use astro.com,
Oh,
and
Astro.
then
Okay.
under
yeah.
extended chart selection, let me go back in so I can tell you the right thing. So if you go to like, user profile, and if you have your saved info
Yeah.
and you click on it, then you can go to extended chart selection. And if you scroll down to additional objects under manual entry, you can share, you can put the number of the
I just did.
asteroid and then show the chart, and it'll tell you.
I just put the number in the chat too if you
Oh,
needed it.
good. Thank you.
Mhm. And also for folks listening and folks here right now, we have an Asteroids 101 episode that we've done of the podcast that like I'm pretty sure we like share our screen as we walk through this process to show folks how to
Oh,
look up for free their
great.
asteroids. So that is a helpful resource for anyone digging into asteroids.
Yeah.
Well, should we talk about TNOs versus asteroids for a bit before we wrap up?
Yeah, so basically TNOs are bigger, they're farther out. TNO means Trans-Neptunian Object, so it exists, its orbit exists beyond Neptune in the Kuiper belt. And Uni at least is considered a dwarf planet. Most of them are, I believe, sometimes they might not be for reasons. Um, and Yeah, typically the biggest difference that you're going to find is that most asteroids tend to exist in the main belt between Mars and Jupiter. And so they're going to be a little bit more personal. Like the ones that are a little bit closer to Mars are going to have like a 2 to 5 year orbital period. And then some of the farther out ones are going to be more like 6, 7, 8, 9 year periods. And then the Jupiter Trojans, when you get a little bit closer to Jupiter, those are going to share the orbit of Jupiter. And we did just do an episode on the different types of asteroids too. So we do have an astronomy episode.
Yeah, the Astronomy of Asteroids episode, and it's coming out in July of 2026. So it may have already come out, or
That's
it might be
great.
coming out in the next few weeks. I'm not quite sure off the top of my head, but by August, it will definitely be available on YouTube or wherever you listen to
Perfect.
podcasts.
Yeah, but I would say the biggest difference when it comes to like astrology interpretation is going to be that asteroids are a little more personal or like concrete or descriptive, maybe like more nuanced to your own experience because they're so fast moving. So it might be like rarer that you have them. Whereas TNOs are going to be like the outer planets, right? They're going to be more generational or collective, or you're going to notice them on larger scale themes rather than more of a individual theme, if that makes
Because,
sense.
like, in the past 30 plus years, Uni has only been in Aries and Taurus, right? So she's just had a lot of time to move through one house of your chart. And then that's something that you share. Like, Lori and I are similar ages. And when she said Uni was in Aries for her, I was like, okay, she's definitely in Aries for me too.
Mhm.
Whereas, you know, other asteroids, Lori and I have different placements, just a few years separate. But I think it's, you know, it's an interesting, and this would be a broader conversation to keep having with this group too. I think this is one of the things that this group is really helpful for, is bringing different people together who are working with asteroids in different ways, doing different research. You know, we have asteroid newbies, we have people who are like, you know, writing encyclopedias on asteroids, everything in between. And then like, you know, how do we work with TNOs? Do we interpret them similar to asteroids? Do we interpret them differently? You know, Pluto comes to mind as like, Pluto was astronomically a planet and then it became a dwarf planet, but astrologers continue to interpret Pluto relatively similarly, if not the same,
Yeah.
despite those, you know, distinctions. And so it is kind of like, well, where do TNOs fit in? Right. That's just, I mean, that's a question I'm kind of opening up if folks have any immediate reactions. And if not, like also just chewing on it, I think it's a worthwhile thing for this group to kind of continue to explore. Because we talked about Nabu a few sessions ago with Amy, Angelo, and I believe Nabu is also a TNO, correct? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Yeah, a
so
lot of the recently named ones.
are TNOs dwarf planets? Are all of them dwarf planets? Or they have to be a certain
Usually,
size or something?
yeah, yeah. There's like a little bit more nuance than TNOs are always dwarf planets, but like almost always, yes. Yeah, there's like I'm not even really too sure of what the weird little
I
nuances
know.
are. They're
Weird.
weird. Yeah,
Yeah.
very
I don't know
specific.
if you ever talked about, you know, I thought how interesting when Sedna, but then when Eris was discovered, then
Hmm.
they really got upset. Like those puny things, they can't, you know, in no man's land. That's how I thought of them.
Oh yeah.
Or
Hmm.
they upset the whole all the astronomers, and it was all about size, and it was just like whatever you want to call them, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
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 I
And
think
if they
they're-
have a, you know, astronomical body that brings this mythic figure into our birth charts, right? Like working with Uni and interpreting her can be quite similar to how you would interpret Hera or Juno, even if they're astronomically categorized in somewhat different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, and people consider Eris and Sedna and all of those asteroids as well. Like you hear the words getting thrown around loosely. And I personally feel like you're gonna use them similarly. It might just be a little bit more generational, kind of just
Mhm.
the way Pluto is versus Mercury, right? Like
Yeah.
they still mean what they mean, but it's gonna, when you have a transit of Pluto, that's going to be more extreme than a transit of Mercury, which you're gonna have
Mhm.
every.
Or even like Saturn versus Mercury, because like obviously the outers and personals. But yeah, exactly. It's like a Saturn transit is going to take longer than a Mercury transit, but they're both planets,
Right.
inner planets, visible planets.
Yeah.
Um,
Um,
okay.
and then yeah, one last quick fun fact that I forgot to mention. But Uni does have a moon that's named after her husband or her counterpart. And he was discovered in 2005, but then named at the same time in on September 1st of 2025 when they were discovered. So I
Very
thought
fun.
I love when they name the moons after
What's
others.
the name?
Ugh,
Oh,
Tinia?
Tinia? Is that what
Tinia?
you said?
Yeah, Tinia. I guess it's Tinia.
oh, that one.
I wasn't totally sure how to pronounce it, and I always pronounce everything wrong. I
I mean,
read
we
a lot.
don't live in Etruscan times, so we're not going to be pronouncing things the way an Etruscan would,
I
regardless.
know. Yeah,
So,
a lot of these more ancient ones, I'm like, it's probably nothing like we would even say it in English. So,
yeah. Okay, well,
Yeah,
we'll
Etruscan doesn't have a y sound, so it would have been uni.
uni,
Uni, yeah.
uni. Thank you, Kai. That's helpful.
Any guesses on Tinia?
Tania. It wouldn't have had a short I, those would have been long E noises.
Hmm,
Tinia,
that makes sense.
very helpful.
That's why I didn't try.
Um, well, we'll go ahead and wrap up the recorded portion of this meeting. And so just, for folks who might have missed the beginning, this is a recording of an NCGR asteroid surge meeting. It's a special interest research group. We meet on the second Tuesday of every month. There's information down below on how to get the Zoom link to join us. And it's just, asteroid enthusiasts, astro nerds, people who might be newer to asteroids, who want to learn how to work with asteroids, people doing in-depth research about asteroids. So it would be really fun, and we'd really appreciate folks coming and joining. And if you have any reflections or anything that came up about uni or uni, as Kai shared, that's the pronunciation. Please comment down below or reach out to us. We love hearing personal stories from folks. And so, yeah, thank you, everyone.